Breaking news coming out in the past couple of hours today, September the 19th, 2025, as we're hearing a third nation's airspace has just been violated by Russia that is a member of NATO. Now, we've already seen Article 4 initiated, which means all the nations of NATO are considering whether or not they should unify and defend themselves against an opposing threat, that being Russia. Are we going to see Article 5 initiated soon? Let me know your thoughts, but it's causing all the nations of NATO to scream World War III in just the past couple of hours. We're seeing headlines everywhere, including in the last 24 hours, a warning coming out from Donald Trump, the United States, letting us know, literally saying we are heading in the direction of a world war, but he says it doesn't have to go that route. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are we going to be seeing World War III unfold here very soon? Take a look at the latest headlines with me. Putin sparks fresh World War III fears with unprecedentedly brutal fighter jet move. This coming out in just the past couple of hours as we're hearing they have violated another nation's airspace. Now, we had seen this before with Poland. We had heard Romania. And now today, take a look at the headlines coming out. Estonia says Russian fighter jet has violated its airspace in a brazen incursion. The move appears to be the Kremlin's latest test of NATO's defenses. Now, we had heard that when this had happened with Poland, Russia had said it was a mistake. No, this was not intentional. Yes, we violated the airspace, but it was not on purpose. Poland had come out and said this was no mistake. They are testing the resilience of NATO. They're seeing if we're ready as they are poking us in preparation for potential attacks. Then we saw that with Romania, and now today, just a couple of hours ago, with Estonia, making it look like this is no mistake. It is happening a lot right now. Russia is poking at these NATO nations. They're saying in preparation for World War III, and we're hearing the warnings coming out from Donald Trump. Take a look. Trump rages, Putin let me down, and Ukraine conflict could spin out into World War III, but reveals one move that will stop the tyrant. I'm going to get into the details as Donald Trump is saying we don't have to go the route of World War III. We don't have to go the route of global conflict and NATO and the United States unifying against Russia. He's saying there is an alternative. I'm going to share with you the details, but take a look. Also, the UK fears as West will come to a bloody end in World War III in just 5 days. With tensions rising and war raging on with no end in sight, one former NATO general admits things are about to get very dangerous for the West thanks to one specific country, and that is an alliance, spoiler alert, between Russia and China. The concern is the two unifying, Russia coming with the military forces, the nuclear weapons, China coming with the funding. They're concerned about the war games that are currently being played at this time. Now, in addition to this, take a look here. NATO boss makes terrifying World War III prediction for next month as fears of global war intensify. Now, they're saying that they're believing that we are on the verge of war here very soon. Man, let me know your thoughts. Are we going to be going into World War III? Is Russia preparing for war? If you think so, put yes in the comments. If you think no, put no. Let me know your thoughts. But we're hearing this is looking like it is no mistake. 3 times now, 3 different nations in just the past week. Is Russia preparing for war? Yes or no? Let me know your thoughts. But I'm going to get you the latest breaking news that is coming out as we're hearing that now Estonia's airspace has been violated by Russia for a full 12 minutes. They had jets flying into the space, and they're saying that this is brazen, this is intentional, this is preparation for war. Russia is getting everything situated, setting up the board like a chess game, strategically positioning, testing out, trying, preparing to go all out into conflict. And as you can see, Donald Trump has said, I have tried to get him to negotiate, to get a ceasefire, a peace deal, and it's not coming to fruition. And this is the warnings we've heard vocalized by Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, for quite some time. He had said, we are not a NATO nation, but we are the first on a list of nations that Russia wants to overtake. And he has gone campaigning around, letting other nations know, if you let us fall, you could be next. And now it looks like that could be accurate, as we are seeing Poland, Romania, and now Estonia on alert with Russia entering into their airspace, sort of testing the waters, getting things prepared for conflict. And again, let me know your thoughts. I see a lot of people pouring in saying, yes, Russia is preparing for war. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to get you caught up on the latest so that way you know exactly what is going on in just the past couple of hours. Today, September the 19th, 2025. Breaking news coming out on these moves, these war games that are being played on the other side of the world, but they're saying it could pull in the entire world, including the United States, which we heard the U.S. has said, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. So if NATO goes to war, if we saw Article 5 initiated, the United States is going to be right there in the middle of the conflict. We've heard Article 4 has already been drawn up. They're already right now considering the extent of the threat that is coming from Russia. So we're going to see what unfolds. I'm going to dive right in, get you caught up on the latest. Now, all the articles, I'm going to put them on the screen, read right from them, hyperlink them in the description, try to hold myself to the highest level of accountability here on the channel, cite the sources so you can see the dates, see where they're coming from, and know and rest assured, this is the latest coming out in the past couple of hours. Today, September the 19th, 2025. Now, if you appreciate that, before we dive in, do me a quick favor if you would. Take a second, hit that thumbs up like button. That simple gesture helps out a ton, just takes a moment, helps spread this out further while we're live across the YouTube platform so more people can get the latest updated information. And to stay up to date, it's totally free. Why not go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I will keep you up to speed, pretty much doing daily updates. And since last week, that invasion of the Polish airspace, we are seeing World War III concerns everywhere as the Russia-Ukraine war has gone on for years, but now they're saying it is expanding, and it looks like NATO is going to get pulled into this. We'll see. I'm going to keep you up to date every step of the way. So I'm going to dive into some video footage, the articles, get you caught up on everything. Now, in addition to that, just wanted to mention to you very quickly that if you are retiring or you're concerned about your investments right now, it is very understandable with all the conflict that's going on, inflation, concerns about the economy. And I wanted to let you guys know about my friends over at Lear Capital. Right now, this is what people are doing to try to protect their wealth, investing in gold and silver. And if you've got a 401k or a Roth IRA and you want to roll it over, they'll help you out. All you got to do is give them a call. You see the number on the screen, 1-800-411-2430. Good people over there. They've been doing business for over 27 years. They've got guides, free guides on gold and silver investing. You give them a call, talk to a real person. They'll walk you through step by step the best plan. Totally free call. Get you information if you are interested in investing with them with gold and silver. It is tried and true, especially through times of conflict. So again, give them a call at 1-800-411-2430 or go to learram.com. And a lot of people right now are making sure they've got their portfolio diversified and they've got some of it in precious metals. If it's something you've been thinking about, you want to test out the waters, Lear Capital can help you out with that. Try giving them a call. Thank you so much to Lear Capital making that available to my viewing audience today. 1-800-411-2430 or go to learram.com. But with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the breaking news so that way you can see it for yourself. Let's start off with some video footage from CNN. Now, I know a lot of people don't like CNN. They lean really far to the left, but for the war news, chew up the meat, spit up the bones. Let's go ahead and take a look at what they got to say as to what is going on today in just the past couple of hours.
All right, there's more breaking news we're following. 3 Russian fighter jets have just entered into Estonia's airspace without permission earlier this morning, that according to Estonia's foreign ministry. Officials say the jets stayed in their airspace for some 12 minutes. Estonia borders Russia and is a key member of NATO. Its foreign minister called the move by Moscow unprecedentedly brazen. That's a direct quote. All this comes as U.S. and Western intelligence officials are still trying to determine whether Russia intentionally flew drones over Polish airspace earlier this month. joining us here in the Situation with CNN's Katie Bo-Lillis. Walk us through, Katie Bo, this new reporting on what's going on.
Well, Wolf, we're just over a week from 19 Russian drones entering Polish airspace.
Poland, the key NATO ally as well.
Precisely so. And U.S. and Western intelligence officials are still deeply divided over whether that incursion was accidental or whether it was intentional, perhaps an effort to probe Western air defenses, right? And part of what makes this so difficult for them to reach an assessment on this is they're really reliant on looking at sort of the technical specifications of the drones that they were able to shoot down in Poland, as well as the flight pattern of these drones while they're in Polish airspace. How were they flying, right? What can they learn from that? And the problem is that most of that information could really be interpreted either way. We heard from some Ukrainian officials who say, look, we've never seen a deviation of this size, 19 drones knocked off target, right? We have also heard from some Western intelligence officials who spoke to us who say, look, these drones are programmed en masse. If you have hundreds of drones in the air at a time, as was the case with this attack, 20 of them run into Ukrainian electronic warfare defenses, jamming essentially, it's perfectly plausible that 20 of them could have been knocked off their pathway. And so one U.S. military official that I spoke to really put the odds at 50-50 either way. The problem now, of course, is how do you respond if you are NATO, if you don't know whether this was intentional or not? What we did hear from senior officials, both here in the United States and in Europe, is either way, whether it was intentional, whether it was accidental, it suggests a really worrying increase in the tolerance for risk that Russia is willing to take.
If it were accidental, I think this second incident now with Estonia, another NATO ally, and Russian jets flying over and entering that airspace, that would seem to confirm it wasn't accidental.
That's certainly going to be brought to bear on the analysis, and I think you're going to see a lot of certainly European nations who already believed that this was intentional saying, look, this is just further evidence.
Yeah, it's happened now twice, so we'll see what happens. Katie Bo-Lillis, thanks very, very much. I want to bring in CNN military analyst, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. Colonel, thanks very much for joining us. So what's your analysis on Poland, now Estonia, two NATO allies, and as we all know, if Russia is involved in engaging militarily against NATO allies, this isn't just against Poland and Estonia, but all NATO allies potentially could be involved.
Yes, absolutely, and that's where the Article 5-like provisions come into play, Wolf. So when you look at the Polish example with those 19 drones, as Katie Bo was just talking about, I would put the odds actually at more 70-30 or 60-40 that the Russians did this intentionally. Now, it is absolutely possible that there was jamming involved, and the way to determine that is whether or not Ukrainian jamming efforts were underway at that particular moment in time, or even Polish jamming efforts. So if there was nothing like that going on at that time, then you can pretty much determine that this was an intentional effort. When it comes to the Estonian situation with 3 fighter jets, that is an obvious offensive play by the Russians. What they're doing is they're testing the air defenses of the Estonians. They're looking at the way in which the Estonians would respond to an incursion, and the fact that they stayed in Estonian airspace for 12 minutes, that's a very long time, relatively speaking. Small country, doesn't take long to fly from one end to the other in a fighter jet. They would be doing this intentionally to determine what the Estonians have and how they would deploy it.
Is there a point at which you think NATO allies should respond more forcefully to these kinds of Russian incursions?
Well, it depends on what exactly the Russian incursions are doing. If the Russian incursions involve just intelligence gathering assets, that's one thing. But in this particular case, at least with the Estonian situation, where you have fighter jets involved, that's an obvious offensive weapon. Some of the drones that were used in Poland also have offensive capabilities. So when you look at how those drones were employed, did they have a type of warhead in their platform? Did they have only electronic gear in their platform? That would then determine what kind of response NATO should have. But generally speaking, NATO should be prepared to shoot these drones down if necessary. Fighter jets, different story, because you're talking about a manned aircraft. That involves something completely different. The best thing to do in that case, at the moment at least, would be to intercept those jets and force them back into Russian airspace.
Good point. On another very sensitive military-related issue, you heard yesterday President Trump say the Trump administration is now working to regain control of the huge Bagram air base in Afghanistan.
There you have it, you guys. So They're switching over to the airbase with Afghanistan, but I wanted to stay focused on the warnings that have been coming out in the past hour of Russia invading Estonia airspace, another NATO nation. We've seen Poland, Romania, and now Estonia, and there are concerns, and we're seeing the headlines coming out about World War III fears, and also in the last 24 hours, Donald Trump mentioning this as well, coming out and saying, warning, this is the direction we're heading, but he says we don't have to go this route. Let's take a look at some of the articles that have been coming out so that way you can see it for yourself here. Now, you can see this one coming out from the Daily Star. Putin sparks fresh World War III fears with unprecedentedly brutal fighter jet move. Fresh new World War III fears have been sparked as Vladimir Putin sent jets into NATO members' airspace without permission this morning, leaving officials furious at the brutal escalation. Now, you'll recall, you can see the dates here, September 19th, that last week, there was questions around whether the airspace violation that was done in Poland was intentional or by mistake. Russia claimed it was by mistake. Poland said, make no mistake, this was very intentional. They're preparing attacks and they're testing out whether or not we're ready for them. Now, we've seen this with Poland, Romania, and now Estonia in the past couple of hours. It's looking more and more like this is very, very intentional. Let's take a look at this article. Vladimir Putin has sparked new World War III fears after sending fighter jets into NATO members' airspace yet again. The reckless action has been described as an unprecedentedly brutal escalation. Now, the MiG-31 jets entered Estonia's airspace on Friday, September the 19th, today, this morning, without permission from the NATO member. According to the latest reports, the aircrafts from Russia flew over the Violates island area and stayed in Estonia airspace for 12 minutes. So it was not a momentary entering into the space. They were in there for quite some time. These jets did not have two-way radio communication with local air traffic controllers, and oddly their transponders turned off. Now, Estonia's foreign minister, Margus Tuskana, said Russian diplomats had been summoned following the shocking escalation, according to the local news outlet ERR. Now, he said Russia has violated Estonia airspace 4 times already this year, which in itself is unacceptable. But today's violation, during which 3 fighter jets entered our airspace, is unprecedentedly brutal. Russia's increasing border testing and aggression must be met with rapid reinforcement of political and economic pressure. Other officials in the country have branded Putin's actions as unprecedentedly brutal and suggested that the Russian leader is attempting to escalate his attacks. Now, earlier this month, Russia also sent drones into Polish airspace before they were shot down by the military during a brigade of strikes Russia inflicted on Ukraine. Several missiles were seen crossing the border into Poland before turning back. With Poland and NATO, tensions were massively raised as fears of all-out war between NATO and Russia edged ever closer, while Russia's war with Ukraine grinds on. Now, the UK government slapped new sanctions on Moscow following last week's shocking violation. It has now emerged that 5 of the drones that were used in the attacks on major Ukrainian cities were also on a direct path to a base actively helping Kiev in its war efforts. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the aim of the drones was to secretly disrupt Ukraine's air defense supplies ahead of tense winter conflict. At the time, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper said the UK will not stand idly by as Putin continues his barbaric invasion of Ukraine. His complete disregard for sovereignty has been shown this week when he recklessly sent drones into NATO airspace. Now, the security of NATO and Ukraine are crucial to the UK's security, an integral part of the Prime Minister's plan for change, international action to increase economic pressure on Russia and to cut off critical cash flows, which he desperately needs to pay for his illegal war, is vital. So they are saying right now that Russia is preparing for war. We need to hit them back with sanctions. We need to also hit them back with cutting off that cash flow that is flowing in. And a lot of that coming in, we're hearing from China as well. The United States saying secondary tariffs are on the way. Sanctions. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this in more detail. Estonia says Russia fighter jets violated its airspace in a brazen incursion. This coming out just a little while ago today. It says 3 Russian fighter jets violated Estonia's airspace on Friday today in a move that the Baltic nation called unprecedentedly brazen, and that appears to be the latest test of NATO's defenses by the Kremlin forces. NATO aircraft intercepted the jets. The military alliance's spokesperson Alison Hart said on X, the incursion occurred over the Gulf of Finland, where the MiG-31 fighter aircraft entered Estonia airspace without permission and remained there for a total of 12 minutes, according to the Estonia Ministry of Defense. Russia has already violated Estonia's airspace 4 times this year, which in itself is unacceptable, but today's incursion involving 3 fighter aircrafts entering our airspace is unprecedentedly brazen. The Foreign Minister Margus Sanak said in a statement, Russia's increasingly extensive testing of our boundaries and growing aggressiveness must be met with a swift increase in political and economic pressure. Estonia's government said that it has protested to the top Russian diplomats in the country after the incursion. Now, Kaja Kallas, the European Union's foreign policy chief, called the incursion an extremely dangerous provocation. The EU stands in full solidarity with Estonia, she said on X. Putin is testing the West's resolve. We must not show weakness. Russia's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to NBC News' request for comments. Nations like Estonia, which was part of the Russian Empire and then annexed by the Soviet Union until it fell in 1991, have been on high alert since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Since then, some European countries have warned that NATO needs to fortify its defenses to counter Russian President Vladimir Putin's ambitions. The incident comes a week after Poland, another NATO ally, said a number of Russian drones had entered its airspace during an attack on Ukraine, prompting NATO to send fighter jets to shoot them down. And this, as I mentioned, is the warning we've been receiving from Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine. He said, we cannot let Russia win this war against us, because if they do, we are just phase 1 of their plan to take over all other nations that were once a part of Russia. And he has said warnings to Poland, Estonia, to Romania, all these other nations, and now it's looking like it is ringing true. This situation brings us the closest we have been to open conflict since World War II. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said after Saturday's incident. Polish aircrafts have been scrambling repeatedly in recent months to patrol the country's airspace in connection with Russia airstrikes in Ukraine, but those strikes have usually occurred overnight or in the early morning. Separately, Romania said Saturday that it had deployed 2 F-16 jets to intercept a drone that briefly entered its airspace on Saturday afternoon. The incursion came after state media reported that Russian Foreign Ministry Sergei Lavrov was planning to meet Secretary of the State Marco Rubio at the United Nations General Assembly next week. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think that this was a mistake? Or do you think Russia is preparing for war and they're poking at different nations, trying to see who is not ready to be attacked next? Let me know your thoughts. What is coming on the horizon? War or peace? Drop it in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. But we're hearing that NATO is saying they are responding to this. And while you drop war or peace in the comments, do me a favor, hit the like button if you haven't done so yet. You appreciate the updates. I see we got about 4,600 people on with me live. If we get half the room to hit the like button, helps out the live stream a ton while we are on. So if you haven't done so yet, you appreciate it, please take a second. Helps out. But we're also hearing these warnings coming out from Donald Trump in the United States. We are on the path to World War III right now with all the conflict that's going on with Russia, Ukraine, NATO. He is warning. Let's go ahead and take a look here. Trump rages, Putin let me down. And Ukraine conflict could spin out to World War III, but reveals one move that he says could stop the tyrant. Trump said that the war in Ukraine started because Putin didn't respect the previous U.S. president, and that is Joe Biden. Let me know your thoughts. Now, we had heard this, that Joe Biden's weak administration, they said, is what has caused other nations to be emboldened. Do you agree? Are you glad that Donald Trump is in office? If so, drop a 47 in the comments. If not, and you liked the way the previous administration handled things, drop a 46. But we're hearing Donald Trump reiterating here, vocalizing Biden's weak leadership as the president of the United States emboldened Russia, emboldened Iran, emboldened all these other nations to go ahead and move forward with their agendas. If you agree and you think Donald Trump is doing a good job, drop a 47 in the comments for support for the Trump administration. But let's take a look at this article here. It says Donald Trump said that he had been really let down by Vladimir Putin before suggesting that his invasion of Ukraine could spiral into World War III. The fed-up U.S. president slammed his Russian counterpart for killing many people before revealing one move that could put an end to the war once and for all. Now, the U.S. president said that he had expected the war to be amongst the easiest to resolve because of his relationship with Putin, but admitted that has not happened, suggesting Putin's invasion could spill out into a global conflict. Trump said the Ukraine war doesn't affect the United States unless you end up in a world war over this, and you could. So Donald Trump acknowledging we could be heading to World War III here. This could turn into a global conflict. It very well could, but he's saying right now, currently doesn't affect the United States, but it could. Asked about how to put an end to the fighting in Ukraine, Trump suggested if the price of oil drops, Putin's going to drop out of this war. If the oil prices come down, Russia will settle. Slashing global oil prices could deal a huge blow to Putin, stripping Russia of the cash that it rakes in from Europe and therefore weakening the war machine in Ukraine. And we actually heard this in the headlines. Donald Trump had come out and said, I'll support every inch of NATO. However, you need to stop buying Russian oil. He said, this is awful. When you're doing this, this is putting you in a very, very compromising position when you're potentially starting war with somebody you're buying oil from. And so he is saying, ultimatum, we'll help you out, but you got to cut off your purchases of oil from Russia. Lower oil prices could be achieved by other countries increasing drilling rates, flooding global markets with cheap energy. The U.S. president later said that the conflict was heading to a third world war, but suggested it was not imminent, emphasizing that the war never would have started if I were president. Trump also said that Putin invaded Ukraine because he didn't respect the leadership of the United States, and that was Joe Biden. Now, the Don referred to his multiple calls with President Putin, saying that Mad Vlad saw Ukraine as the apple of his eye. And he later said that he had no regrets about inviting the Russian dictator for a historic meeting in Alaska last month. Trump added, he's, Putin, killing many people, and he's losing more people than he's killing. Frankly, the Russian soldiers are being killed at a higher rate than the Ukrainian soldiers. It's millions of people that have died in the war, millions of souls, and they're not American soldiers. The most powerful man in the world also claimed that the soldiers were being killed at levels nobody's seen since the Second World War. And I've heard a lot of people vocalize this. We're actually in World War III right now. It just hasn't spread and gotten to the point where all the nations have been pulled in. The comments come as Sir Keir Starmer and Trump hold the press conference at the Chequers just hours after announcing a groundbreaking tech deal. The UK Prime Minister chimed in following Trump's comments on Ukraine, saying that they were working together to end the killing in Ukraine. Now, Starmer also said the war was a challenge to Europe and criticized some countries in the West for being too reliant on Russian energy. But he emphasized there was no simple silver bullet while calling for tougher sanctions. Now, the U.S. president also faced down a range of other questions, from his stance on Gaza to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. So a lot going on in the world right now. But we're hearing that he is issuing out the warning to the United States. We could go the route of World War III if we do not get things under control here. And he's saying we have got to hit Russia financially. Now, the UK also is fearing potential World War III as well. Now, that is why we are hearing, let me go ahead and share this with you, coming out just a little while ago. The EU is increasing its presence on Russia. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. The European Commission video footage coming out from Live Now with Fox just a little while ago. This clip is only 7 minutes long. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about what is going on with Europe and their concerns about all-out war with Russia.
Against Ukraine since the beginning of the war, striking government buildings and civilian homes alike, hitting our EU office in Kiev, the representation of our union. The threats to our union are also rising. In the last 2 weeks, Russian Shahid drones have violated our union's airspace, both in Poland and in Romania. These are not the actions of someone who wants peace. Again and again, President Putin has escalated, and in response, Europe is increasing its pressure. This is why today I'm presenting the 19th package of sanctions. First, on energy. Russia's war economy is sustained by the revenues from fossil fuels. We want to cut these revenues. So we are banning imports of Russian LNG into European markets. It is time to turn off the tap. We are prepared for this. We have been saving energy, we have been diversifying supplies, we've been investing in low-carbon sources of energy like never before. And today these efforts pay off. Then we have just lowered the crude oil price cap to $47.6. To strengthen enforcement, we are now sanctioning 118 additional vessels from the Shadow Fleet. In total, more than 560 vessels are now listed under EU sanctions. Major energy trading companies, Rosneft and Gazprom Neft, will now be on a full transaction ban. And other companies will also come under asset freeze. We are now going after these who fuel Russia's war by purchasing oil in breach of the sanctions. We target refineries, oil traders, petrochemical companies in third countries, including China. In 3 years, oil revenues from Russia have gone down in Europe by more than 90%. Now we're turning that page for good. My second point. We're targeting the financial loopholes which Russia uses to evade sanctions. We're putting a transaction ban on additional banks in Russia and on banks in third countries. We're stepping up our crackdown on circumvention. As evasion tactics grow more and more sophisticated, our sanctions will adapt to stay ahead. Therefore, for the first time, our restrictive measures will hit crypto platforms and prohibit transactions in cryptocurrencies. We're listing foreign banks connected to Russian alternative payment service systems, and we are restricting transactions with entities in special economic zones. Coming to my third point. We add new direct export restrictions for items and technologies used on the battlefield. We also list 45 companies in Russia and third countries. These companies have been providing direct or indirect support to the Russian military-industrial complex. In a war driven by innovation, cutting off Russia's access to key technologies is crucial, above all when it comes to drones. Our economic analysis is clear. Our sanctions are severely affecting the Russian economy. The interest rate is at 17%. Inflation is persistingly high. Russian access to finances and revenues are consistently decreasing. And Russia's overheated war economy is coming to its limit. Even more interesting is that when speaking directly with partners that speak to Russians, they say that among the first Russian request is sanction relief. So we know that our sanctions are an effective tool of economic pressure. And we will keep using them till Russia comes to the negotiation table with Ukraine for just and lasting peace. In parallel, as I announced last week, we are working on a new solution to finance Ukraine's defense efforts. This is based on the immobilized Russian assets. We must be very clear, this is Russia's war, and the perpetrator must pay for it. With the cash balances associated to these Russian assets, we can provide Ukraine with a reparations loan. The assets themselves will not be touched, and the risk will have to be carried collectively. Ukraine will only pay back the loan once Russia pays reparations. We will come forward with a proposal soon. Finally, we are aligning our sanctions with our G7 partners. This is under the steer of the Canadian presidency. And to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom, we are also working in lockstep with a coalition of the willing. Europe has been by Ukraine's side from the very beginning. And faced with Russia's escalation, Europe stepped up to the challenge. We will continue to use all the tools at our disposal to bring this brutal war to an end. I now call on member states to quickly endorse these new sanctions. We want Russia to leave the battlefield and come to the negotiation table. And this is the way to give peace a real chance. Thank you.
All right, so that live event popping up as breaking news here in our Live Now from Fox Studios. You just heard the latest from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen giving a statement as it relates to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, on the heels of this, we do have a statement that I want to share with you from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Take a look at your screen. It says, quote, since last night, Russia has been carrying out a drone attack on Ukraine. Nearly 90 strike UAVs. Our warriors managed to neutralize most of them. He goes on to say, quote, I thank them for defending our skies. The Donetsk region, Kyiv region, and the capital, Sumy region, Kharkiv region, and others all came under attack. Among the targets were Ukraine's infrastructure and our enterprises. In other areas, 2 people were wounded, and Kyiv recovery efforts are underway after the Russian attack, which damaged public transport infrastructure. All necessary services are involved. Again, this is breaking news we are following. We'll continue to follow the very latest of the Russia-Ukraine conflict here on Live Now from Fox.
There you have it, you guys. So that just unfolding a little while ago, that entering the airspace in Estonia that is causing the concerns of World War III escalation. Article 5, we're hearing they are saying this is a brazen, unprecedentedly brutal move by Russia. Let's take a look at the headlines again for those of you coming in a little bit late here. Putin sparked fresh World War III fears today with unprecedentedly brutal fighter jets. This is Estonia now. So we've seen Poland, Romania, now Estonia. Russian fighter jets violated its airspace in a brazen incursion. We're hearing 12 minutes. This was not a mistake. They were in there for quite some time. Trump rages. Putin let me down, and Ukraine conflict could spin out to World War III. However, he's got a plan that he's saying he's trying to avoid us from going into a global conflict. And the UK now, let's take a look at this. Fears as West will come to a bloody end in World War III in just 5 days. 5 days, this coming out here, September 19th today. That is September 24th. They're estimating things could erupt. Let's take a look at this headline here. One country's involvement in World War III could spell the end of the West. According to one general, he outlined the possible outcomes if an all-out war began, and many do not show a good sign for the UK. So they are estimating World War III coming here very soon. Several wars are ongoing around the world, with some political analysts already believing that the Third World War has already begun. Do you believe that? I've had a lot of people say that to me, that World War III already started. It just hasn't officially been announced. If you believe that, drop WW3 in the comments. If you think we're going to be able to stave off global conflict, put peace Let me know your thoughts. But for one general, things will reach a new level once China enters the battlefield. So again, major concerns about China getting involved, unification with Russia. And we just saw last week that 80-year celebration anniversary of World War II coming to an end. China hosting Russia, North Korea, 20 adversarial nations of the United States all together in China. And Donald Trump called them out and said, I see what you're doing, and I know you are conspiring against us. And right after that, we saw Donald Trump announce and declare that the Pentagon should restructure our U.S. armed forces to prepare for potential threats, as he saw a unification of the adversaries of the United States coming together in China. Following harrowing comments by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte about China's military goals, fears are rising of what a war with Beijing could look like for the West. Now, one general has revealed the current outlook, and it is not looking good for the West if China gets involved. So again, this is not a concern of one nation, but multiple nations coming together, essentially a world war. Writing in the Daily Mail, General Richard Sheriff, former NATO deputy, Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, said the war will likely begin in the Baltic states, with power outages hitting all three nations, but particularly Lithuania. As the initial phase of the war gets underway, the states impose martial law as power outages, the initial cause of the unrest, begin to spread across Europe. Sharif put the initial start date of World War III as November 3rd, 2025, as the UK, France, and Germany begin to lose their own electricity supplies. Now, he says that in a desperate appeal to the public, Sir Keir Starmer will urge the nation is secure before pleading with the public to ignore waves of disinformation on social media. One day later, Russian leader Vladimir Putin will move troops from the Kaliningrad region to its border with Lithuania with help from neighboring Belarus. This will eventually result in Lithuania being invaded in the first official land incursion into NATO territory by Russia, prompting all of NATO to step in under its Article 5 rule, and we've heard Article 4 has already been initiated. Following this, an all-out war breaks out between Russia and NATO, but NATO publicly implodes through social media due to a lack of public support from President Donald Trump. After this, China's leader Xi Jinping will call Putin to congratulate him on the land grab and offer all the help available to him in the war. Now, according to Sharif, this includes tens of thousands of stockpiled 122mm or 152mm shells, as well as hypersonic missiles that can be launched from over 1,000 miles away. After this, an emboldened China turns its attention to taking Taiwan, an autonomous island ruled by China's pre-communist democratic government. And this is many of the various wars that the United States is involved in, supporting Taiwan against China, supporting Ukraine against Russia, also supporting, we've heard, every inch of NATO territory, and we've heard the warnings that when China declares war on Taiwan, China has already let the United States know, we have compromised your critical infrastructure systems, and if you try to come to the aid of Taiwan, we will shut off your water, your transportation, your communications, your electricity. We will wreak havoc on your critical infrastructure systems in the United States if you get involved in the conflict. China warning the United States. Now, as a result, however, America is dragged into the conflicts, but Trump eventually stalls and later confirms that America has no intention of saving Taiwan. Because of this, Western nations have no choice but to recognize Xi's move to annex Taiwan, with France and later the UK formally recognizing Chinese sovereignty over the island, all by November 8th. Now, this is this particular individual's predictions. He added, in just 5 days, the balance of global power has altered radically. China has seized the prize that it long desired. Russia has guaranteed the eventual conquest of Ukraine and begun to reclaim the Baltic states. NATO has disintegrated. Europe is preparing a new alliance with the Far East, and Britain is exposed as a tiny island no better able to defend itself than Taiwan. Wow. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are we going to be heading this route? If you think so, put yes. If you think no, put no. But we're hearing the warnings coming out left and right. And let's take a look at this one here. NATO boss makes a terrifying World War III prediction for next month as fear of global war intensifies. Mark Root predicts how it's all going to go down, and it starts with China and Russia. Another prediction here from somebody else, and you can see this coming out today, September the 19th. Mark Root is saying the same exact thing. A lot of these world leaders are saying we are at the doorstep of World War III. NATO Secretary General Mark Root issued a warning that could see the world descend into World War III very soon. If you thought 2025 couldn't get worse, there's always something waiting around the corner to throw our lives into chaos. Tensions across the world have been rising, sparking fears that another war is brewing on the horizon, this time between NATO-allied countries and Russia. Now, this comes after Russia claimed that those countries have engaged in a war with them after backing Ukraine after it was invaded, and then protecting Poland after Russia flew drones into its airspace. The UK announced that British fighter jets would join NATO defense missions over Poland. And now Mark Root has weighed it on the impact all this fighting could have, particularly if Russia's ally, China, were to join in as well. China has been attempting to take over Taiwan for a number of years now, and he believes the two countries could work together to mutually get what they want, as long as Russia provides a distraction to China's invasion. Let's not be naive, Root told the New York Times. If China's President Xi Jinping wants to attack Taiwan, he would first make sure that he makes a call to his very junior partner in all of this, Vladimir Putin, residing in Moscow, and tells him, hey, I'm going to do this, and I need you to keep them busy in Europe by attacking NATO territories. That is most likely the way that this will progress. So they're saying, as one attacks, the other will attack as well to distract and divide resources of the United States and NATO. NATO have been warned that Russian leader Vladimir Putin could strike London or even Paris, and comments from Moscow's Kremlin aren't exactly fanning the flames. Russia and Ukraine have been embroiled in conflict for a few years, which U.S. President Donald Trump even tried to broker a peace deal to let it end with peace. But Putin's advisors said that NATO countries are already at war after Poland shot down its drones. And we had that announcement a couple of days ago. Russia came out and said, we are at war with NATO. This is the first known case of a NATO member shooting down the Kremlin's military assets. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said their airspace was taken advantage of, and it wasn't something to be taken lightly. NATO is at war with Russia. This is obvious and needs no proof. NATO provides direct and indirect support to the Kiev regime. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told Russian journalists on the 15th of September. Deputy head of Russia's Security Council Dmitry Medvedev then took to Telegram to warn, but seriously, the implementation of the provocative idea of creating a no-fly zone over Ukraine and the ability for NATO countries to shoot down our UAVs will mean only one thing: a war between NATO and Russia. After the airspace violation, NATO said in a statement, the multi-domain activity, which will commence in the coming days and continue for an undisclosed amount of time, is in response to ongoing airspace violations, including the numerous Russian drones that have violated Poland's airspace on September 10th. According to General Richard Shirif of the Daily Mail, here's what could happen. If war started on the 3rd of November, 2025, it could happen due to a power outage across Violates, the capital of Lithuania, which then shuts down the city's essential services. Civil unrest follows, and Latvia and Estonia's power failure follows. From there, Lithuanian president, he then might proclaim martial law in response to unrest and troops storming the city. Energy Minister Kiev's claims a malware attack on the nation's grid is the cause of leadership implemented curfews. Sweden and Poland offer to provide backup generators. The UK, France, and Germany face grid glitches, and panic is stamped out by Keir Starmer. On the 4th, Putin announces that the troops in Kaliningrad are being placed on full alert and will border Lithuania. Then the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will warn the Kremlin against troops entering its space. Now, Lake Vistiets, near where Lithuania borders both Poland and the Kaliningrad, breaks out in conflict with Lithuanian and Czech troops returning fire on a small guerrilla force of unknown aggressors. When NATO soldiers are killed and one attacker is captured, he claims to be pro-Russian Lithuania, but is found to be a mercenary for the Chechnya. Now, Putin claims that Russian forces in Kaliningrad have come under fire. Fan invades the Suwalki Gap. Rutte announced that Article 5 is being invoked and warns Trump. So this would be all the nations of NATO getting pulled in, he's saying, in this scenario. Poland warns Russia to stay clear of its airspace, and the UK is on high alert. On November 6th, the Enhanced Forward Presence battle group in Lithuania is attacked by Russia, and NATO and Trump get involved. But Trump won't condemn Russia. UK Defense Secretary John Healey reports to Cobra that Russia entered Vilnius and Finland, and Poland attempts to support, but is blocked. On the 6th, President Xi pledges China's full backing in both Lithuania and Ukraine, and Chinese missiles start warfare on Taiwan. On the 7th, Trump will warn China of sanctions, and Chinese warships will close in with a full-blown invasion following. The U.S. won't save Taiwan and sanctions China. If the U.K. buys from China, they will be met with issues too. French President Emmanuel Macron sides with China and begins to reclaim the Baltic states amid the chaos, and NATO has essentially split down the middle. That's a scary prediction, so let's hope it's not accurate. So that is one of the suggestions that is coming out right now, as we are seeing predictions and warnings coming out in the last 24 hours of World War III. And again, all of this coming out because just last week we had seen those Russian drones invade Polish airspace. Poland saying this was no mistake. Russia saying it was totally a mistake. But then we saw Romania, and now in the past couple of hours, today, September the 19th, Estonia airspace also being violated for a full 12 minutes by Russian jets. And now NATO is saying this is Russia completely preparing for all-out war and invading new nations and going to war with NATO. So major concerns of World War III as those fighter jets just a couple of hours ago entered into Estonia. Now, we're going to be seeing where we go from here, but let's go ahead and take a look at this. Mornings with Maria is saying these are serious violations that are unfolding. This coming out just 4 hours ago, as they're saying we could be entering into a global conflict.
Welcome back. Well, the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, declaring an important success this morning, saying that Ukraine has reclaimed roughly 60 square miles of land taken by Russia over the summer. Russian airstrikes into the Donetsk region reportedly killed at least 5 people yesterday alone. Meanwhile, Kyiv hit back with long-range strikes on the Kremlin's oil refineries. Vladimir Putin says more than 700,000 Russian soldiers are still deployed on the front lines of Ukraine. President Trump commenting on it all yesterday. Watch.
The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. Millions of people have died in that war, millions of souls, and they're not American. The soldiers, mostly soldiers, as you know. The soldiers are being killed at levels that nobody's seen since the Second World War, but they're being killed, and I feel I have an obligation to get it settled for that reason.
Joining me now is the U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, always a pleasure. Great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Good to be with you again.
Your reaction?
Well, obviously this war needs to end. President Trump is a peacemaker. He's settled 7 wars in the first 8 months in office, and I think he'll be able to resolve this. But at the same time, you know, our NATO allies are stepping up and making sure that the Ukrainians have the best equipment and munitions in the world, and that's American munitions and equipment. And so we've sold $2 billion worth of American equipment and munitions to our NATO allies, who have provided that to Ukraine, and we expect billions upon billions more in the coming months. But President Trump understands leverage. He's been speaking out against countries like Hungary, Turkey, and Slovakia that are buying Russian oil still. He knows that that's what's funding this war on the Russian side, and he knows that he needs Europe to step up as much as the United States is. And so that's the conditions he's trying to create to get to a resolution and end this war.
Yeah, but Ambassador, I mean, is Russia becoming even more aggressive? We know that Poland said that Russian drones tried to violate Poland airspace again, just days after Poland shot down more than a dozen of those drones from Russia. Now, those drones were not armed. They're being called duds, but it caused a major alarm within NATO allies. Poland's president, Karol Nawrocki, called it a test by Russia. And I will be speaking with the new president of Poland next week. I hope our audience joins me for that special interview here on Tuesday with President Karol Nawrocki of Poland. But Ambassador, I also spoke with the Secretary of State of Poland on this program this week. Here's what he said about all of these incursions. Watch. We should point out that the officials in Belarus, which of course is a Russian ally, claimed that the drones entered Polish airspace by mistake. You do not believe this was a mistake?
We do not believe that it was a mistake. Of course, there were hundreds of drones heading towards Ukraine, and many of them already hit the target in Ukraine, or they were eliminated by Ukrainian air forces. But those 21 drones, they were not by mistake in Poland. It was a on-purpose step taken by Russia, and we are 100% sure of that.
So Romania also spotting drones from the Kremlin in Romanian airspace last week, the second NATO ally now behind Poland to report an incursion. Ambassador, what should NATO do? Should there be a response from the entire NATO partnership?
Well, I was in Poland this week and met with that gentleman, the National Security Advisor. I met with the Foreign Minister and the Defense Minister. And obviously this drone incursion dominated our discussions. And if it was a test, I think NATO wildly passed. And here's what happened. We responded right away, shooting down the drones, sending a strong message. We met last week in Article 4 consultation to discuss next steps. And, we are deploying additional assets to Poland and to those on the eastern flank. So NATO is responding. I think it points out that we need to continue to work on air defense that is multi-layered, that is inexpensive compared to the threats, because obviously it's shooting down drones that are duds, to your point, with multi-million-dollar missiles is inefficient and ineffective. So we're going to continue to work on those issues as well. But Poland is right there staring at the Russians, seeing what they're doing in Ukraine. But I think the Russian threat sometimes is a little overstated. They have not had a lot of success, and to your point, Ukraine has actually taken back territory, and so to me that points to a weakness in Russia. And as their economy continues to falter, I think their continuation of this war is going to be difficult. But President Trump is going to continue to find the leverage and to find the conditions where he can bring both sides and mediate a resolution, because again, he's not going to set the conditions. Both sides are going to have to agree to a peace deal. But let's continue to work on this and continue to hope and pray that this resolves in the near future, so that the deaths will end.
This is very alarming. You know that. I mean, look, you've got citizens joining the army in Poland right now. They're worried that they need to be ready should Russia attack Poland. I mean, drones that are duds and, testing NATO. What is this, taunting NATO allies?
Well, it is not, because again, the intelligence hasn't concluded as to whether this was intentional or not. If it's intentional, that's a very serious violation, and we'll respond accordingly. We're going to not get ahead of President Trump's and the intelligence community's determination on that. So at the same time, we're going to be ready. We're going to make sure that our alliance is strong. That's why these investments are so important that we agreed to at The Hague.
Yes, of course. And President Trump has been touting the strength of NATO and America's relationship with the UK in particular. Watch this.
The United States and the United Kingdom have done more good on this planet than any two nations in human history. And I want to congratulate the United Kingdom on making the vital commitment to spend 5% of GDP on defense at the NATO summit this year. I'm very honored to tell you that we've solved 7 wars that were unsolvable, wars that couldn't be negotiated or done.
Ambassador, what are the next catalysts that you're watching with regard to that 5% spend on defense for NATO members?
Well, the most important thing is the incremental year-on-year growth and commitment to that. We're seeing the Germans step up. We're seeing UK and France also. A lot of our allies are stepping up, but we still have some like Italy and Spain that need to demonstrate that they're on the same path year over year on their growing their defense budgets.
Interesting. All right, we'll be watching that. Thanks so
There you have it. And this is the concerns and the warnings coming out regarding Ukraine, then Poland last week, and then also Romania. But now we are hearing that Estonia today, September the 19th, in the past couple of hours, has been invaded in their airspace by Russia, as well as Putin sparks fresh World War III fears with unprecedentedly brutal fighter jet move. Estonia says Russian fighter jets violated its airspace in a brazen incursion just a couple of hours ago, this coming out. And now Donald Trump is warning, hey, this conflict, it could spin out into World War III. Putin has let me down. He said that he has a plan, though, to try to get it back on track. And that is why in the last 24 hours, we're seeing fears of World War III predictions left and right. As we're hearing, Article 4 has been initiated by NATO, and there's concerns. Are we going to be heading to Article 5 here very soon, pulling in NATO, the United States against Russia? Concerns about China getting pulled in with Russia, and this outbreak just spreading globally, and China starting their invasion of Taiwan. We will see. I will keep you up to date, but some pretty big breaking news coming out in the past couple of hours, as they're saying Estonia's airspace violated by Russian jets for a full 12 minutes. They're saying this was no accident. This was no mistake. This was pretty blatant and obvious. This is Russia testing the waters for potential expansion of the war and pulling NATO nations in. We're going to be seeing where we go from here. Let me know your thoughts. War or peace? Drop it in the comments. But I'll be sure to keep you up to date as more comes out. This is the latest breaking news. Thank you so much for joining me. All these articles are referenced in the description, along with, if you'd like to learn more about investing in gold and silver, diversifying your portfolio, Lear Capital, go to learram.com. Information is going to be down below. Thank you for making that available. You give them a call, speak to a real person, get actual pamphlets, info, totally free, and they'll help you with getting information about investing in gold, silver, precious metals, and everything cited down below. Again, if you appreciate that, hit the like button, subscribe. I'll keep you up to speed. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.